Okay, well, I guess I'm never flossing my teeth again. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jake, the scary story guy. Ooh. And today we're talking about a fairly obscure horror film called Anything for Jackson. Now, how obscure is this movie? Well, as of the time I'm filming, it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. The MPAA didn't bother to rate it. I had never heard of any of the actors in this movie. And guess what, guys? It's freaking great. And if it weren't for one Letterboxd account I follow, thanks Spooky Astronauts, I wouldn't have ever even known this movie existed. Anything for Jackson is a 2020 release, to the extent that it was released, and it stars Julian Richings and Sheila McCarthy as a very sweet elderly couple mourning the death of their recently deceased grandson, Jackson. I wonder if they'd do anything for him. Now, I went into this movie completely blind, and I think that made the experience a positive one for me. So if you'd like to watch this movie without knowing anything further about the plot, you should stop watching now. For the rest of you, I'm not really going to spoil anything beyond the setup, but I am going to give a rundown of the basic premise. Starting now. So in the very first scene, we meet this old couple, and they're very sweet. He's complaining that she sewed his sleeve unevenly, so it makes him look like one of those rapper guys, and they clearly love each other very much. And then they kidnap a pregnant woman. Turns out Grandma and Grandpa dabble in a bit of Satan worship in their spare time, and they intend to carry out a ritual that will allow the spirit of their grandson Jackson to inhabit the body of this woman's unborn child. Wow, they will do anything for Jackson. Sorry. Quickly becomes apparent, though, that these folks are in over their head. They didn't quite know what they were getting themselves into, and they've inadvertently opened themselves up to some fairly frightening shit. Which I kind of like, because to the extent that legitimate devil worship exists, it isn't just a fear-mongering concoction of the political right wing, you have to understand that none of the people involved in such things are actually menacing. They're all just enormous dorks. And if any of these people ever actually happen to make contact with some incomprehensible evil from the depths of hell, they wouldn't have the slightest idea what to do about it. Their salt and silly robes and Latin chants would not save them. Latin probably just make things worse, honestly. Never chant in Latin, guys. Insofar as there are lessons to be learned from this type of movie, it feels like that's at the top of the list. Anyway, the movie entirely rests on the performances of this elderly couple. Audrey and Henry, their names are. If Audrey and Henry manage to strike the right balance between sweet and scary, the movie works. And boy do they. These performances were incredible. I mean, obviously creepy old people show up in scary movies all the time. Never have they been so likable. Both of these guys are genuine showstoppers, and frankly, it's impossible to be bored when either one of them is on screen. Objectively speaking, they're the villains here, but you never fully feel like that, because when shit starts to go down, these guys are just as scared as the pregnant woman they kidnapped. At the same time, they do approach the situation with enough determined detachment to make you realize, no, these people actually just kidnapped a pregnant woman and performed a satanic ritual on her unborn baby. So they're not quite as much like your grandparents as they seem. Apologies if your grandparents have in fact kidnapped a pregnant woman and performed a satanic ritual on her unborn baby. We all have our family stories, I guess. Now, this movie for a stretch does fall into the standard barrage of visitations from various ghosts and specters, and while some of these were certainly just the usual fare, there were a couple that I found pretty original and effective. If you're currently trying to build a dental floss habit, you may want to hold off on this movie for a bit. The movie does get a bit worse as it goes along, but horror films so rarely stick the landing that I kind of have a hard time holding Anything for Jackson's weaker final act against it. I guess I just didn't really feel like I was there for the conclusion of the story. I mean, obviously it had to wrap up somehow, but I was mostly just having a good time along the way. Now, it's not a Hall of Fame movie by any stretch, but I would actually go so far as to call it a must-watch for horror fans. Not bad for a movie without a Wikipedia page. Watch, they're gonna make a Wikipedia page tomorrow just to make me look stupid. I'm gonna give Anything for Jackson 4 stars. Guys, as always, thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to read my original horror stories, I'll put a link in the description. And if you'd like to see more horror-themed content like this, please go ahead and subscribe. Thanks again for watching my video, and here's hoping you survive to see the next one.